Hi, this is Chantel, and I'm going to be working problems from our XYZ textbook section 1.1 on linear equations. I'm starting with just some really basic problems, solving for y, and then I'm going to get into some word problems. So if you know how to do this part, just fast forward through it. All right, so I'm going to start with just, let's say, number 1. So when they say solve each equation for y in terms of x, what they're saying is you want y on the left side. So 31 is x plus y equals 5. So we don't care which side y is on, we just want it by itself, because you can always flip the two sides at the end. But it's already on the left, so I'm going to subtract the x from both sides, and I end up with y equals, and don't forget that the x is going to subtract out. So we get y equals, and on the right side we have 5 minus x, and that is it. That's all you have to do. So let's look at one that's just a wee bit harder. Let's do, I don't know, 35. All right, so we've got 5x plus 4y equals 10, and we're solving for the y, so the thing that we're trying to get by itself is right here. So the first thing we have to do is start out where we've got an addition, and we work our way in towards the y. And I've said in another video that this is kind of like peeling an onion. You start out far away and you work your way in. So we're going to subtract the 5x from both sides like that, and the 5x is going to subtract out, and we're left with 4y equals 10 minus 5x. Now we still have a 4 multiplied with the y. So because it's multiplied, we need to divide, which is the inverse of multiplication. So we have to divide both sides. And you're going to have the the 4 dividing out, and you're left with y equals this part right here. You could simplify the 10 over 4, but I'm going to leave it like this. There's a couple different ways to write this. Okay, so the next one is everything's over on the left side. So we still need to get the y by itself. If we moved it to the other side, it would end up being negative, and then we'd have to deal with negatives, which a lot of people aren't really great at. So we're just going to work on subtracting everything to get it over to the other side, or adding. So we're going to add the 5 to both sides. Whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other. And we're going to subtract the 4x, so minus 4x over here. And you'll see that the minus 5 and the plus 5 subtract out, and the 4x minus 4x subtract out, and you're left with on the left side a y, and on the right side you have 5 minus 4x, and that's the final answer. Okay, in this next set of problems, we don't have y's and x's. These are actual equations for a variety of different kinds of things, and some of them are in finance, and some are in physics, and some are in geometry, but it doesn't really matter. You just have to pay attention to what they're asking you to solve for, and solve for it just like we solved for y. So say the first one, 39, says we need to solve for L. So that's an L right there. So we've got 2L plus W equals P. So I'll rewrite this down here. We've got 2L plus W equals P. And we need to solve for the L. And I recommend circling and using colors and things because I think it really helps people to keep everything straight. So you want the L by itself. So we're going to subtract the W from both sides and get that taken care of before we deal with the 2. So we've got 2L equals P minus W. Now you want to come back over here and divide out the 2 because it's multiplied, and that is the inverse. So then the 2 divides out, and we're left with L equals P minus W over 2. So there's going to be times when you're given an equation, but you're needing to find something that's not solved for in the equation, and often it'll keep you from messing things up if you just rearrange the equation first, and that's what they're asking you to do here. So let's look at 43, because sometimes seeing something like pi really throws people, but just treat it like a variable or a number or whatever. We've got 2 pi r, which you may recognize that from geometry, plus 4h equals s, and we're supposed to solve for h, so I'm going to circle the h. So we want it by itself. So now we have a plus here. That means we want to subtract out this 2 pi r from both sides. All right. So that subtracts out, and we're left on the left side with 4h equals s minus 2 pi r. Now we've got 4 times h, so that means we need to divide out the 4 on both sides. And the 4 is going to divide out to leave a 1, of course. When you divide it out, it leaves a 1. And you get h equals s minus 2 pi r over 4. And you would just leave it like that. So if you were given this equation and you were given all of the information except for the h, and you're looking for the h, this is what you would do to solve it. In this next problem, I'm going to do 46. It's r plus 1/3 w equals x. So if you look up here, they just have the 1/3 next to the w. Sometimes that throws people. What that really means is that the w is on top. So you could say 1/3, you can say 1/3 w, but then it looks like the w is on the bottom. So you can say 1/3 times w, or another way to do it is just to say w over 3. Any of those things work. So I think w over 3 is more clear. But you can do it however it looks easiest to you. So we're supposed to solve for w. So I'm going to move this up a little bit and solve for w. So the w is right here, and we have a plus sign here. So that means first we need to subtract out the r, so minus r, and that r is going to go away on the left side, and we're left with 1/3 w, or I'm going to rewrite it as w over 3 because I like that better. It's just a little tidier to look at. And then that equals x minus r. All right, so now to get rid of the 3 and have the w isolated by itself, since it's divided, the inverse of division is multiplication. So you can say 3, or you can say 3 over 1. It doesn't really matter. So I'm going to multiply the whole right side. So don't forget, you've got to do the whole right side times 3. So be careful with that. And I'm running out of room, so I'm going to come up here. All right, so we end up with the 3 on the left dividing out, and we get w equals, and I'm going to put the 3 first on the right side. So I get the 3, and then I have x minus r. And you can distribute that 3 if you want to, but it's actually a little easier to look at when it's like this. Okay, so now we're going to talk about some word problems, which is the thing that most people have a really hard time with. And linear equations are very applicable to lots of things in life, especially finance and money stuff, both interest on loans and interest on savings type things. So in this case, as I start to read it, I see an amount was borrowed, there's simple interest, and amount was repaid. So we're supposed to find the duration of the loan. The first thing I recommend doing is, like I said in the lecture, write down the equation that you think you're going to be using. And in this case, we've been given interest equals principal times rate times time. So that's I equals PRT. And then take every single variable and list them out, and then go look for that information. Be careful you don't just start sticking things in, but you actually think about it and make sure that it makes sense that it's going to go there. Okay, so an amount of $4,000 was borrowed. So when you borrow money or when you start saving money, the initial amount is the principal. Okay, so that's maybe some vocabulary that you need to know, but hopefully that helps. $4,000. Okay, so we've got $4,000 in the principal. It was borrowed at 5% simple interest. And the fact that it is simple interest means we get to use this equation. Later, when we start talking about exponents, we're going to learn a more accurate way to measure interest. All right, but so here we're going to have the rate is 0.05. So it's got to be as a decimal. So 5% equals 0.05. 5%, I'll come down here and explain that. 5% is 5/100ths. So anything that says percent means per 100. That's what percent means. And 5 over 100 is 0.05. Okay, so 5%. Okay, so time is what we're looking for because it says find the duration of the loan. Find the duration. That means find the time. So I'm going to put a question mark here. And you can even go so far as to go up here and underline the T or circle it or something, so you know that's what you're going to be looking for. And then the amount repaid was $5,200, and we're supposed to find the duration of the loan. So now we're not being given the interest. I'm sorry, we're not being given the interest that was the total amount that we had to repay, but we are given the amount we started with and the amount we repaid. There's a couple different ways to think about this. One is just using kind of logic, and that is the fact that, well, if we repaid $5,200, that means, and we started by borrowing $4,000, that means that the interest we paid is $1,200. Okay, so sometimes you just have to use a little bit of common sense and logic to figure it out. It might not be given right in the problem. So you can go ahead and put $1,200 right here. Okay, and I'm not going to use dollar signs or anything. I'm trying to keep it simple. Okay, so now we need to find the duration of the loan. So the duration of the loan is the T. So we've got I equals PRT. And generally, I find it easier before you put in a bunch of numbers, especially big numbers, to go ahead and just solve for the T. So I'm going to go ahead and just divide both sides by PR. Divide both sides by PR. And remember, it doesn't matter if T is on the left or the right. You just want it on top and by itself. That's all you have to have. So now the P's and the R's divide out, and I'm left with, and we can just switch sides here, T is I over PR. Okay, so now we're just going to plug everything in. So now we're just going to take the 1,200 on the top and divide it by the P, which is 4,000, times the R, which is 0.05. And if you have a graphing calculator, you can do this all in one step and just use lots of parentheses. So make sure that you use parentheses around this whole thing here, or else the calculator thinks you're just dividing 1,200 by 4,000. Okay, so in the end, this becomes 1,200 over 200, which is just 6. So don't stop there. Stop and think, okay, what did I just find? Well, I found T equals 6. What does that mean? So generally, this equation gives us the amount of interest in years, or the principal in years, whatever it is that we're looking for. So T equals 6 years. Does that make sense? If you got like 2,000 as your answer, you know you did something wrong. So make sure it makes sense when you do this. All right. Okay, so this next problem you want to take a moment to read. So why don't you pause and read the problem. Okay, so hopefully you took a moment to read this, and we've got to figure out, and this is the kind of problem that doesn't have a formula or an equation. We just kind of have to logic our way through it, and we have to come up with our own variables. So I'm going to we often use the capital R equals revenue. So R equals revenue, and I really recommend doing this step. Don't just jump right in without knowing what your variable means. That's where I see most people getting completely lost in word problems, is they just dive in, have no idea what their variable is. So I really recommend, almost require, that you write down this part right here. So the revenue in 2011. Okay, so R is the revenue in 2011. So what it says was this is, so 1.5 billion is 3.5 times what the revenue was in 2011. So try to convert that to a math equation. 1.5, so I'm going to write it in the order I'm reading it. 1.5 billion, okay, it means equals 3.5 times R, their revenue in 2011. Okay, so it's just taking English and turning it into a math equation. So I'm just going to rewrite this a little bit. I'm going to take out the billion and just remember in the end we've got billion. You could put a bunch of zeros, but that's a little hard to deal with. So we're just going to remember it's billion. And so I've got 3.5 R equals 1.5. So how would we find R? Well, we just need to divide both sides by 3.5. And we get r on the left by itself equals, I'm rounding, so this really technically I should say about equals 0.429, and there's some more digits there. So 0.429 what? Well, 0.429 billion, because we took that word off there. So we need to leave billion, put billion back in. So 0.429 billion means 429 million. Okay. So I'm going to clarify this. So this means 0.429 times a billion. Can I get a billion in here? There's a million. There's a billion. So if you put that in your calculator, you'd see that you just basically move the decimal point over 3 places to here, and you get 429 million. Okay, so that was the revenue in 2011. So this next problem is another commerce problem. This one is about Nike selling athletic footwear and how much of the market, the global market, they represent. So take a moment, pause the video, and read this problem. Okay, so as you can see, these things are actually taken from real sources. So these are real life numbers. All right, so in 2016, Nike sold 121 million pairs of shoes. And this represents 31% of the global athletic footwear market. So first, let's remember that 31%, when we're dealing with math with percents, we need to remember that that means 31 100ths, which means 0.31. Okay, so I'm going to use the 0.31 here. So, and I'm also going to figure out what my variable is. So I'm going to say F equals footwear. Okay, pairs of footwear. Or you could say P for pairs, or A, or whatever you want to call it. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to say F for footwear because it's easy for me to remember. All right, so they're saying in the problem that 31% of all footwear is 121 million. That's Nike's portion. So 31% of means times all footwear is 121. And you could say million if you want to, but I'll do it this way this time so you can keep track of all the zeros, is 121 million. All right, so if we want to find F, we're going to divide both sides by 0.31. 0.31, and the 0.31 divides out, and I get F equals about, it's going to round to 390,000 or so. Oh, I'm sorry, million. 390 million pairs of footwear. Okay, so that's all there is to that problem. It's just a percent problem. Okay, so this next problem is a measurement geometry kind of problem where we're given the equation for volume of a right circular cylinder, and we're just given some pieces of information, and we have to find something. So this is a really good example of one where I highly recommend that you write everything down that you're going to be using. Okay, so we're going to write down the formula, and then I'm going to take the formula. Notice I haven't even gone to read the problem yet, and I might be wrong in the end, but this is usually a great place to start, at least to get your thoughts straight. So we have V, and pi is just a number, so it's not a variable. So I'm going to leave it in there. Just it's not going to be listed here. R, and we have H. Okay, V, R, and H. Okay, so find the height. Right away, I know that I'm finding the height, so that's the question mark. Of a right circular cylinder whose radius is 3 inches. So we've got 3 inches. I'm going to put inches so that I remember what my unit is. And whose volume is 54 pi cubic inches. Inches cubed. Okay, so that's my unit. So my unit I'm working with is inches. Now I'm going to drop that unit out while I work with the formula. Okay, so I'm looking for H. That I know. I've got this question mark right here, and so I'm looking for H. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and rearrange it before I stick in all these numbers. So I get V equals pi r squared h, and I'm solving for h. So I'm going to divide both sides by pi r squared r squared on both sides, and so these divide out, and I end up with h, which is the variable we're looking for, equals v over pi r squared. And again, you could put the numbers in and then rearrange it. That is totally fine. It works just the same way. You just are working with numbers instead of variables. So on top, the volume is 54 pi, and on the bottom I have pi r squared. So I'm going to use parentheses so I remember to square it. R is 3, and I square it. So right away, before I do anything else, I see that the pi's are going to divide out. So I make those go away, and I get 54 over 3 squared is 9. So 54 over 9. So 54 divided by 9 is just 6. So the answer is the height of the cylinder equals 6 inches. Okay, so don't forget to go back and find the unit and put the unit on there so it has some sort of meaning. Okay, this last problem is a measurement problem again. It's just another simple geometry problem. And I can't say enough for how much I see over the years every student I work with has an easier time if they draw a picture. So I drew a little picture here of a rectangular box. And I think it's just really helpful to have a picture with everything labeled, and then you can picture what it is that you're working with. You can do this without it, and it's totally fine, but it is helpful to have it drawn. So the volume formula is right here, equals length times width times height, or just LWH. So I'm going to say this is my length, this is my width, and this is my height. Okay? And the volume I'm just going to put right smack in the center. Volume equals. Okay, so we've got volume equals, length equals, width equals, and height equals. So we're going to put that over there. So now I'm going to read back through the problem, which you can pause here and read through it if you'd like. So it says with a length of 8 inches. So that's the length. Okay, so I'm going to put 8 inches here. And I'm going to go right over here, and I'm going to put it here too. Length equals 8. The width, which is double the length. Now there's no numbers there, so often you'll just read right through that and forget all about it. But don't miss that they're saying it is double the length. Well, so I'm going to say 2L here. Okay, so the width is 2L, which the length is 8, so that means that the width is 16. Okay, so that equals 2 times 8, which is 16. And the volume, they're giving us the volume. Sorry, this is inches. And the volume is 144 cubic inches. Of course, it's cubic because it's volume. Okay, so it says to find the height. The very first part of the sentence says find the height. Sorry, I skipped right over that. So height equals question mark. I'm going to label it over here too. And the volume is 144. Okay, so now you have everything on the picture, you have everything in your list, now you just need to go through and do it. I'm trying to find the height, which is here, and so you can go ahead and rearrange it first or not. Again, it doesn't matter. So we've got V equals, well, that was not a very nice V. V equals LWH, looking for the H, so I'm going to divide both sides by LW, and I get these two dividing out, and I'm going to switch sides so the H is on the left. H equals V over L times W. Okay, so V was up here, that's 144, and L is 8, and W is 16. So if you work that out, you get 144 over 128. So the height is 1.125, and that unit is inches. Okay, so 1.125. All right, there we have it. Good luck on your homework.